In this congregation over the last couple of years, it seems that we've had a lot of loss. People have lost their parents, grown children, partners and spouses, other losses. I want to talk today about the grief that comes with that kind of loss. Grief is a reflection of the loss of a connection. And we all feel a connection to the people in our lives. We feel a connection to the place where we live. We feel a connection to jobs that provide us with our identity. We feel a connection to our beloved animal companions. We feel connection to our bodies and our senses. And so we feel grief when our homes are damaged, or when we have to move from a place we loved. We feel grief when we lose a beloved animal companion. We feel grief when age or accident takes from us a sense or a part of our physicality we used to count on. You aren't mobile in the same way anymore. You can't see in the same way anymore. You can't hear in the same way anymore. And we all feel those griefs. And some griefs are more supported by our culture than others. When you lose a beloved person, the culture is all there for you. When you lose a beloved animal, sometimes people are there for you, and sometimes they just say, just get another dog and get over it. But studies show that people love their animal companions, especially their favorite one in the house. Really, they love them almost to the same level that they love their partners and spouses. So a sociologist I was reading was talking about this, and she said her husband had a dog that he called his soulmate. And she said, I idly asked him one night, I said, if you had to pick between me and your dog, which? She said he closed his eyes and said, please don't make me think about that. In our culture, we don't really have a way anymore of making our mourning visible. So mourning is grief made visible. It's the outward manifestation of an inward grief. And a lot of cultures have ways that you can make your mourning visible. You have certain colors of clothes that you wear, and most cultures it's black, some cultures it's white. Other cultures, in the Victorian culture, if you could afford it, you had mourning clothes, which were black, and then you had half mourning after a certain number of months, depending on whom you had lost. You would have half mourning clothes of purple or gray before you were expected to wear bright colors again and enter back into the social whirl. But our culture is a get over it, move on kind of culture. And so even if you've lost a person, people say, come on, don't isolate yourself. Get out there with people. You're wallowing in your grief. It's been, 2 months. So time to get over it, time to move on. And people watch you to see how you're going through the grieving process. They monitor you a little bit. It's out of love, but they evaluate. They'll tell you about the stages of grief. They'll say, there's denial, and then there's anger, and then depression, and then acceptance. I left one of them out. Bargaining. Thank you. I always forget that part. So they'll say, which stage are you in? And what they don't tell you is sometimes you can be in all the stages at once, or you can skip them. They don't go in order, and they pretty much swirl around you like a ride at a carnival. And you can be in more than one at the same time. You can be in denial and anger at the same time, where you're just really mad, but it's not about that. No. And there's no set amount of time to spend being in each one. And some of them you will revisit 3 times or 14 times, and other ones you may skip altogether. And we go through these with most of the griefs, most of the losses that we experience. We go through the stages, not in order, all in a swirl, sometimes at the same time, about little things and big things. And one of the stages of grief that I noticed as a therapist, and I've noticed for, just as a human, is the grief ADD, attention deficit disorder, that happens especially with divorces and death. You just get attention deficit disorder for a while. You can't concentrate on anything for any length of time. You can't follow a TV program. You can't even care. You have to drive really carefully because you have more accidents than normal. I'm thinking of stories and discarding them. No, not that one. Edit. I did know a guy. I was doing couples counseling for him and his wife, and he had a hard time being faithful, and so they were always kind of on the edge of divorce, and whenever he would have an affair, he would have a car wreck. It was kind of amazing, but they're still married as far as I know. And but ADD is part of grieving and confusion. People worry that they're not grieving right. Their friends might say they haven't cried enough. Come on, you need to cry. Let it happen. Or you're crying too much. You're feeling it too much. That was quite a vulgar display. That's only if you live in Downton Abbey with the Dowager Countess. That was a vulgar display. Or, I can't believe you were laughing at the funeral reception. Laughing. Or you go, I'm laughing, I shouldn't be laughing. Really, honey, almost every way to do it is okay. Grieving is a comparison-free zone, and it's a judgment-free zone. And the only way to really make it last longer is to fight it. I came from a culture that demanded that if you were a faithful person, you would fight grieving. The story was they would wait until a big truck passed you on the highway. And they would say, children, you know the shadow of that truck that passed over you? Yes. Did you get hit by the truck? No. It was just the shadow of the truck, right? Uh-huh. Well, that's how it is when people die. It's just like the shadow of a truck has run over them. They're not really dead. So we rejoice in their life and that they're still alive with God, and we're not sad. So, and I know that they meant well. I know they meant well. And yet, there are some groups that feel it displays a lack of faith if you're let yourself be sad. So, but fighting it does keep it from happening. But most other ways of doing it are just fine. And there's no way to know how somebody else's grief is. There's not like a little machine that you can stick your finger in and it gives a griefometer. You just feel what you feel. Your pain is your pain, and people do try to compare. And it is one of the practices of our people that we do say, well, it could be worse. You're sad about something, you go, yes, but the family down the street lost their child, and I have only lost my 84-year-old parent, and so I shouldn't be as sad as they are. Or, gosh, that was only a dog. I don't know why she's still grieving. That's ridiculous. And other people grieve less over a spouse, and you're still sad about that. No, grief is inside. You can't ever tell what a person's grief is. And all you can see is their mourning, which is the outer part of the grief, and you're not there with them all the time, so you have no idea. But grief's not predictable, and it doesn't have rules. It comes when it wants to. My mother got breast cancer when I was 19. And first she prayed for a year that it would go away, and then she went to the doctor. So after 5 years, she died when I was 23. And I was supposed to get married in May to a man named Mark, and she died in January. And I had not met his family yet, so I went straight from her funeral to the airport to California to meet Mark's family. And so I didn't know what to feel, couldn't really feel anything. I had been comforted almost to death by the other seminarians at Princeton who were like, oh, a chance for pastoral care. And finally my roommate had to just like stand at the door of our room like this. She does not need you. They were all like, So I went straight to meet his family, and I was just nothing but hungry and mad. And I never did cry that much about her. I was kind of mad about getting married, but that's another sermon. But later, years later, I was living in South Carolina. I had a darling best friend that I loved with my heart, and she moved to Florida with her family. Her husband had just bought Blockbuster Video, so he had to move down there. And I fell apart. I crumbled. I cried every day. I was ridiculous. And I told myself all the time, you are being ridiculous. This is just your friend moving away. Florida is not Mars. You can visit her there. And then I finally realized, oh, this is grief from my mother that has zapped through time and attached itself to this other grief, because it does that sometimes. Grief is unpredictable and sneaky, and it doesn't have any rules. Jodi Picoult, in her book, My Sister's Keeper, says, there should be a statute of limitation on grief, a rule book that says it's all right to wake up crying only for a month. After 42 days, you will no longer turn with your heart racing, certain that you've heard her call out your name. That there will be no fine imposed if you feel the need to clean out her desk, take down her artwork from the refrigerator, turn over a school portrait as you pass, if only because it cuts you fresh again to see it. That it's okay to measure the time she's been gone the way we once measured her birthdays. John Irving, in A Prayer for Owen Meany, says, when someone you love dies and you're not expecting it, you don't lose her all at once. You lose her in pieces over a long time. The way the mail stops coming, and her scent fades from the pillows and even from the clothes in her closet and drawers. Gradually, you accumulate the parts of her that are gone. Just when the day comes, when there's a particular missing part that overwhelms you with the feeling that she's gone forever, there comes another day and another specifically missing part. And people say, there's pain, and then there's suffering, and they say pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I think that's kind of harsh. That just sounds cruel to me, like suffering is your fault. But I kind of see what they're saying, in that pain is about what happened, and suffering comes from the stories you tell yourself about what happened. And lots of people tell themselves stories after a loss. In the loss of a job, they say, if only I had worn different stuff or said different things or been on time or not told my boss the truth or whatever. Stories about someone who's died, you think, I should have asked them to do that other test. I should have made the doctor try that other thing. If my sister hadn't been so insistent that we have a do not resuscitate, then we could have still had her with us. The suffering comes from the stories we tell, but we can't help it. losing someone makes you sad, and grief makes you crazy, and really, you just have to go through it and be kind to each other. And there's so much guilt layered in with most grief. You think, oh, I can't believe the last words I said to him were so angry. I can't believe I didn't call him every day to keep him alive. I can't believe I didn't go see her more. There's so much guilt, and there's also fear layered in grief. There's fear of, who am I going to be now without him? Who am I going to be without my hearing? Who am I going to be now that I've lost this job? I don't have my identity anymore. What's going to happen? And then other people, while comforting you, they also want to make sure that they don't do the same thing you did to make it happen. So they'll say, what exactly happened? And what do you think you could have done? Like, do you think if you'd really made him stop smoking 10 years earlier, you wouldn't have lost him? Because, you're married, so you're supposed to keep him alive. And there's shame and despair in grief, too, because one, we lose the person, and then we lose the chance to make that relationship perfect. And we have this idea, especially with a parent, even if you lose somebody you really don't like, somebody you have issues with, because that's the way I talk about it. You have issues. You've lost that connection, and you've lost that chance for the ideal person they could have been. And in our culture, we have such a Puritan culture. Here's how Puritan thinking works. It says, God blesses some people. And the way you can tell if somebody's blessed is if they're healthy and rich. So we look at the healthy and rich among us, and we go, those are the blessed people. Now, this is never at the level of consciousness, but we do tend to admire people who are healthy and rich, and we tend to kind of think maybe God, if we believed in God, likes them better than he or she likes us. And if you're sick or poor, it's because you're kind of unblessed by corollary. And so there's shame in being sick. For some of us who have our roots sunk more deeply into the Puritan culture, I'm sick, I must have done something wrong, and people will help you with that. They'll go, you're sick, you should really take more vitamin L, because vitamin L, everybody knows, will keep you from being sick. And, you shouldn't take it in capsule form. That was your problem. You should have ground it up over your oatmeal, and then you wouldn't be sick. Because that's what I do. I keep myself from getting sick that way until I get sick. I used to read Deepak Chopra. I'm sorry. I used to read it, and I used to think, you are so young. I want you just to get a cold. I'm a much better person now. What do you say to somebody who's grieving, somebody who's lost something terrible? There's nothing to say. There's no perfect thing to say. I just want to tell you that, and I'm a professional. I've been studying this for years. There is no thing you can say. So everything that you say to somebody in the line at a memorial service sounds stupid, but I want to tell you, they are not sitting there shaking your hand and going, what? How trite. That sounds stupid. They're shaking your hand and thinking, I'm so happy you're here. It means a lot. I can't really even process right now that you're here. But anything you say, I don't remember what you say. I see your mouth moving, and I think, thank you, because you're right here. And that's called the ministry of presence. And the ministry of presence is the important thing. It doesn't matter what you say. There's no right thing to say. How do you get over grief? You don't. You don't. You just continue living, and the time in between the stabs in the heart gets longer, and the proportion of pain to love in the memory gets more love and less pain, sort of. And you are like a gnarled tree that has scars from being hit with lightning. And we love looking at trees. That's beautiful. And your heart, as you get older and older and go through more, your heart gets kind of gnarled and scarred, and we have to see that as beautiful. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross says, "The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal, and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you've suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same. Nor would you want to." Anne Lamott writes, "You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up. And you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold. But you learn to dance with the limp. There's no way to do it wrong. And the good news about being in a community such as this is that you don't have to do it alone.